Hello, good morning, and welcome to Politics at Jack and Sam's Daily, the podcast that gives you pretty much everything you need to know about the day ahead in British politics in exactly 20 minutes.
It's Tuesday, December the 17th. 3 sitting days left in the parliamentary advent calendar. Will it be Barry Gardiner, Richard Tice, or a festive elf Chris Philp, who jumps out from my Commons advent calendar window this morning? Who can say? Anyway, my name is Sam Coates of Sky News, and with me, as you heard laughing there, is Jack Blanchard of Politico.
I can't think of anything more festive than a Barry Gardiner jumping out of an advent calendar window. I'm feeling very festive, Sam. I was at St Bride's last night for the annual Journalists Christmas Carol concert where they got me to do a reading. And I have to say, nothing gets you more in the Christmas spirit than seeing a bunch of hacks all together singing Christmas carols. It sort of teed me up nicely for the Christmas week. And we have, 2 episodes left before Christmas is over after this one. So, it's all very exciting.
You truly are part of the journalistic elite, Jack. I was at in Covent Garden watching The Tempest with Sigourney Weaver, an extraordinary production with amazing staging and bangs and crashes and massive shrouds coming down. There was somebody from Number 10 in the audience, rather admiring the way that they did this extraordinary set that had Ariel descending from the ceiling. I did ask them whether or not they thought they could get Angela Rayner coming sort of on a harness down from above the stage next time Keir Starmer was in town, but they didn't think that was likely.
Yeah, it definitely won't have been Keir Starmer who was at the Tempest last night, because he, of course, being Keir Starmer, is out of the country for one more day only. We think this is Keir Starmer's last day abroad of 2024. He'll be very sorry about that, I'm sure. He is in Estonia today. There's lots else going on as well, which we will quickly whiz through. The buses bill is arriving in the Lords. That gives local councils power over buses. There's some sort of photo op going on with Tory MPs and peers, focusing on what they are now calling the farm tax. That's the changes to inheritance tax. That means farmers have to pay more inheritance tax. The government is announcing more compensation for customers hit by water outages. And the Home Office is going to confirm the police funding settlement today. We don't know how much it's going to be for police forces, but we do know it is going to kick off an almighty row when we see those figures later this morning.
It's almost like some of the weeks of the new government didn't quite have enough in it, so they're now trying to pack them all in the minutes leading down to Christmas recess. There are 2 other massive things today. Really, they have packed in the final minutes. The first, which is the thing that they want us to talk about, is a jumbo piece of legislation about children's well-being and education. And this does all sorts of slightly connected things. It rolls back on some of the Blair-era academy reforms by putting local councils a bit more back in the driving seat. It introduces some kind of register to ensure that kids are attending schools. And there are profit caps on what they call social care providers for kids, basically adoption providers. Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson is the person who's been put out on the morning round this morning. But that rather makes me think that they're less interested in us focusing on the other big change today, which I'm kind of very passionate about talking about, which is major new plans about how we regulate AI, which are already, even before they've been published, causing an absolute stink. And this is all about the future. So we're going to focus on that in the second half of this podcast.
Let's just talk about foreign affairs-y stuff first there, because this is the Prime Minister's last day out of the country in 2024. He is in Estonia today for the second day of a defence summit, and this is a pretty important thing given the global context of what is happening with the war on Europe's eastern border. Keir Starmer is in Tallinn. He is meeting with leaders from the Joint Expeditionary Force, known as JEF. If you don't know what JEF is, it is basically a British-led military partnership of other Northern European nations. This was set up in the aftermath of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. We kind of clubbed together with the Nordic countries, so Scandinavian countries, the Baltic states, the ones all bordered down the Russian border, and Holland as well. It was set up originally as a sort of post-Iraq Afghanistan thing, where Britain would keep working with some of the countries it worked with in the Middle East. The truth is, these days, it is very much focused on Russia, given the Russian threat as it is seen to be on Europe's eastern border. And so anytime the Prime Minister is over in countries like Estonia, you know what they're going to be talking about. There are British troops stationed in the region. Prime Ministers traditionally go and visit British troops shortly before Christmas, so Keir Starmer will be doing that today. The thing they're all really going to be talking about, Sam, today in their private meetings is what is going to happen in the Ukraine war in what now 34 days' time when Donald Trump takes over as President of the United States. Donald Trump obviously is going to completely change the dynamic of this conflict, as we all know. We've been talking about this for weeks. He himself was talking about it last night. Donald Trump gave his first press conference last night since winning the election. And oh my goodness, I'd forgotten what these things are like, Sam. You said yesterday you were telling us how you'd got up early to read through all the court documents from that Prince Andrew case. Well, I got up early this morning to read through the transcript of Donald Trump's press conference last night. It is 15,000 words of rambling, extraordinary stuff. I don't recommend anyone watches the whole thing because you probably haven't got time, but it is quite interesting. And what you have to do as a journalist when Donald Trump gives these sorts of press conferences, which are going to now keep happening now that he's won again, is you have to sort of filter through all of the noise and all of the sort of random side journeys he takes you on and try and focus on the little bits and little nuggets of information where he is actually telling you something new and interesting about either his thinking, or he'll just reveal some random bit of intelligence in passing that, normally presidents might not tell you. In amongst promises about threatening to sue various media organizations, promising an energy revolution, promising to cut people's taxes, a lot of the stuff we heard on the campaign trail. He did talk last night about the Ukraine war. He said the war is going to be stopped. He said, quote, "We've already made a little progress on that." And I guess that's true in the sense that the dynamic around the Ukraine war has already changed the way people are talking about it since the US election. But the thing that he kept coming back to a couple of times, Sam, that I thought was interesting was he kept talking about the images he'd seen of the war, how terrible the war was, the death, and also the destruction of the cities in Ukraine. And he kept making this point that, when you say they take over a country, what are they taking over? Like, it's been flattened. There's a 100-year rebuild job there. He was asked, do you think Ukraine should cede territory to Russia? Well, a lot of that territory, when you look at what's happened to those, there's a city there's not a building standing there. It's a demolition site. There's just rubble. So what he sort of seems to be suggesting is that there are parts of Ukraine so damaged by war that it almost doesn't matter quite if Ukraine is told to cede that territory because the buildings have been flattened. And then he'd go on to say, well, this war never would have happened if I'd have still been president at the time, blah, 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 blah. But you can see him starting to sort of make a case in his own very Donald Trump way as to why it's okay for Ukraine to give up territory in some sort of deal in 2025, because the damage to these cities is such that the cities just aren't there anymore. Now, I'm sure lots of people in Ukraine would not agree with that assessment, but you can see the way he's talking about it, the way his mind is working, you can start to see the parameters of how this conversation is going to go once he's back in the White House next month.
And you could sort of sense that President Zelensky of Ukraine has been readying himself for a change in the conversation, a change in the approach, ever since he did that interview with my Sky colleague Stuart Ramsley a couple of weeks ago, where he started talking about a possible outline deal, which seemed to involve potentially ceding a little bit of territory in return for the West giving Ukraine more cover from NATO. Now, that's not something that NATO looks like it's on the precipice of doing, certainly in any concrete way. But that is represented the first time that Zelensky had talked about there being any possible deal involving territory at all. And now, clearly, you can see why, because the incoming president is putting that firmly on the agenda.
The other thing Trump talked about, just very briefly on foreign affairs before we move back to the domestic stuff, Sam, is on Syria, where he said, quite interestingly, one of the sides has been wiped out in Syria, but nobody knows who the other side is, but I do. Do you know who it is? It's Turkey. Turkey is the one behind it. He's a very smart guy, meeting President Erdogan, I'm sure. They've wanted it for thousands of years, and he got it. And those people that went in are controlled by Turkey. That is definitely the sort of semi-assessment of some Western leaders, maybe not quite bluntly as that, but it's interesting to hear the soon-to-be President of the United States talking in such blunt terms about the extent to which President Erdogan is actually behind what happened in Syria a couple of weeks ago, and the power dynamics at play there, and Donald Trump, as ever, impressed by power and success, very much praising Turkey's, shall we say, controversial strongman leader, who he thinks has played a blinder in that conflict.
There have been peace talks about what Syria should look like involving Turkey and, I think, from memory, Iran in recent days. So there are regional power players who are trying to sort of shape what happens in that country, meaning that it's not impossible that Donald Trump effectively has a bit of an in if he goes through Turkey to try and sort of shape the future of Syria. In the Times this morning, we had an interview with Syria's new leader, Mohammed al-Jalani. And that was fascinating because it suggested a softening in the approach to Israel. Now, effectively, this means that the guy who's sitting in the capital, Damascus, doesn't control all of the country, but the guy in the capital at the moment is suggesting that Syria will tolerate Israel in a way that it hadn't before. The two countries had been previously at war, but in return for Israel withdrawing troops. Let me just read you the key bit. He said, Israel's justification for attacks was the presence of Hezbollah and Iranian militias. So that justification is gone. He said, we are committed to the 1974 agreement, which and we are prepared to return to UN monitors. We do not want any conflict with it, whether with Israel or with anyone else, and we will not let Syria be used as a launch pad for attacks. So I think that is the new leader in Syria signalling that they are going to take a very different approach from Bashar al-Assad, effectively a puppet of Russia and to a certain extent of Iran. And that might help smooth the path to, for instance, the Syrian leadership being taken off prescribed terrorist lists. Clearly, yesterday, the UK said it sent a delegation of senior UK officials to Damascus for meetings. So could there be some progress there? Could there be progress there before Donald Trump resumes the presidency again? Quite possibly.
Yeah, al-Jalani in that interview calling on Britain and other countries to remove HTS from their list of prescribed terrorist organisations. And in fact, Sam, overnight some pictures have emerged of al-Jalani meeting with British officials overnight. Anne Snow, not someone I know, but she's apparently the UK's special representative of Syria, photographed with him in Damascus as part of a delegation having talks about, I'm sure, exactly that. And you can see, it seems likely to me that group is going to be removed from terrorist organisation list at some point soon, because Britain and the West are clearly trying to do deals with them. They're saying all the right things, and therefore, it just makes sense, I would think, from Britain's point of view, to try and make this work, given how much the power dynamic has shifted over there.
Cool. Let's pivot back to domestic matters and the thing that I'm most passionate about today, and making sure it doesn't get lost in the fog of war of all the different things that are going on. Now look, nothing screams "don't look here" more than a mega consultation released the Tuesday before Christmas. And it's a consultation on a fiendishly complex area where, frankly, nowhere across the globe have they properly worked out what to do about this. And it's a consultation that has been truncated. Normally the government consultations are 12 weeks, but this one has been shortened to 10, 2 weeks of which are over the Christmas break. All of that combined with the nice natty little trick that we're not meant to talk about any of it until the embargo is lifted this morning at 10:30 this morning. And what that does when the government embargoes stuff till 10:30 is it stops the previous day's papers from writing about it in the morning, and they hope that the next day's papers find the whole subject a bit boring. So the whole approach to the government screams, don't look here at this. It is a massive consultation on how AI will work in this country in future.
Go on then, Sam. Tell us why it matters to people so much. We've got a war going on in Eastern Europe. We've got a war going on in the Middle East. Why is this the issue that you think is the most exciting one to talk about? Why is this going to dominate your mind today?
Right. So we're at the foothills of working out how to make AI work, artificial intelligence work. And there's a big question. What AI does, in short, is it hoovers up content from all across the internet and then uses that to teach effectively different AI models about the world so they can answer any of the questions that you or I have, so that when I log into ChatGPT or Perplexity or the X AI model Grok, it understands about the world and can sort of give you information, data and explanation for what's going on. But the big bit of conflict is between the AI people who are building the models and those people whose content is copyrighted. In other words, people who make films or write books or music or basically get paid to create content. And on the one side, you've got the AI industry that wants to be able to hoover all of this up and absorb everything from the Beatles back catalogue through to all of the novels of Jane Austen and sort of put that in their models with questions about how they might pay for that. And the copyright industry is going, hang on a moment, what you're potentially doing is trashing a multi-billion pound industry, global industry, for the sake of some US tech companies who want the right to access all this stuff. And this is a big fight that is beginning in Britain, and as I say, hasn't been resolved anywhere around the world. It's really just all about money and really the huge amounts of money that can be made from AI versus the huge amounts of money that can be spent by protecting copyright and therefore paying singers and writers and other forms of artists. But the question that basically the government is looking at today is how easy should it be in future for AI to access copyright materials? And if they do the people who own the rights have the automatic right to royalties? Or is there going to be a system where AI can hoover up all this data and we can end up having AI Taylor Swift singing AI versions of the Beatles back catalogues for clicks and Google profits? Or would the estates of both be entitled to money? Now, the creative industries have had a look at the government's plan and are incredibly nervous. And there is going to be a big campaign that was basically sort of launched overnight from the BPI, which represents the music industry, PRS, who represents the music industry, UK Music, and then publishers, authors, artists, music business. They're all going, at its core, we're very worried about the key bit of the government proposal, which is that the basic principle that this government's going to go for is to introduce an exception to copyright law for AI, right? So there's copyright law that should protect content from being used by anybody, but there will be an exception to copyright law for AI. So that's a presumption in favour of these AI companies accessing material. But simultaneously, they say they are going to allow rights holders to reserve their rights so they can control the use of their content. In other words, people who make films and music and hold the copyright to those can somehow say no at some point in the process if they don't want this to happen, or negotiate a deal or negotiate royalties. But what the creative industries say is, well, hang on, if the presumption is that you can take the content, who do we call and how do we stop this happening? And will they really listen if we try to negotiate royalties deal? We have no sense of how this works for us. And the AI industry and the US tech industry will be rubbing their hands with glee that it's about to be made a lot easier for them. And it's going to be quite tricky for us to stop things from happening that we don't like.
I mean, I've heard some bleak visions of the future in my time. I'm thinking of like Cormac McCarthy's The Road and stuff. But an AI Taylor Swift singing an AI version of the Beatles back catalogue for clicks. I think I might just give up on Christmas now, to be honest. That was the worst thing I've ever heard. Okay, so that's what the government are talking about. A couple of questions for me will be, A, how is that going to go down with the industry? Are they going to celebrate this or are they going to be furious about it? B, and perhaps more importantly, is Britain really in a place to regulate this stuff at all? Britain feels like rather a bit part player in this conversation, and often with tech regulation, we've sort of stood on the sidelines in the past. Remember, Rishi Sunak was very interested in certain aspects of AI regulation, was desperately trying to be a big player on the scene, and you'll remember that weird fireside thing he did with Elon Musk at that weird AI safety summit that he held, that he was very keen to say is a big important thing. And of course, AI safety is a big important thing. But do tech companies actually care about Britain in all of this? In a world where you have America, where you have the EU, which is a much bigger bloc doing more effective tech regulation than we ever can. Does this actually matter where we end up on it?
Well, I think you'll find the creative industries are extremely worried. They're extremely worried that, for instance, potentially AI companies don't even have to tell them when their content is used. There's a bit in the consultation press release which talks about how AI companies could be made to disclose what they're using. So there is big concern there. So why does the UK matter? Well, the UK matters because really the US, the EU haven't worked out quite how they're doing it. And it seems to the people in the UK creative industries that Britain could end up being the guinea pig, going faster and further than anybody else pro AI, with the kind of US tech companies licking their lips. And then we end up setting the pace for the rest of the globe in a way that damages the creative industries. Look, there's no doubt that some in government, particularly Lisa Nandy, do understand the dangers of some of this, and there are bits in the way that the government talked about it, about showing that they know they need to protect the creative industries, but the fear is that something rushed through, and remember this consultation, shorter than it normally is, part of it is over Christmas, ends up generating legislation that's at best naive and just tilts the balance of power, and this is all about power and money, too far into the hands of the US tech giants, and doesn't do enough to protect the already slightly beleaguered creative sector, who are fighting to make sure that artists, musicians and all the rest of them can get paid in an environment where that's not very easy.
All right. I think we'd better leave it there, Sam. My clock is flashing 20 minutes at me, so I think we'd better wrap this up. We are pretty much out of Christmas time. We have, a Wednesday edition for you and a Thursday edition for you left, and that is it this year. So enjoy the rest of the day, Sam. I hope you have fun, and I will look forward to seeing you on the Zoom tomorrow morning.
See you there.